Assalamu alaikum and welcome again to Today in African History with Baba Shaka. And of course, I'm Baba Shaka. All right. Today is January 4th, which means it's our fourth installment of this ambitious project of the 365 installments for this year, today in African history. Today, I want to talk about one of who I consider one of the greatest thinkers in the Pan African world in the 20th century. Some of you may have heard of him, some of you may not. His name was C.L.R. James. Now, I was looking up some information about him to do this broadcast, this video, and I came across an like an essay that was written by a gentleman. I think is a gentleman. Yes, a gentleman by the name of Scott Timke. Timke, Scott Timke. And I think that Mr. Timke captured the essence of C.L.R. James, at least from my point of view, and I hope you agree. So I'm just going to, read you this, and we're going to learn a little bit about this brother. All right? So, born in Tunapuna, Trinidad and Tobago, to lower middle class black parents, one generation removed from emancipation. C.L.R. James was a social theorist, a historian, writer, and revolutionary whose maturity roughly corresponds with what Eric Hobsbawm called the short 20th century. It was this contextual standpoint of a Caribbean childhood and later movements to Britain, the United States, and West Africa that shaped his view of the destructive complexity of the modern world and the imperative to break with the old bourgeois civilization. Right? In the global north, James is primarily known for two books: The Black Jacobins, written in 1938, which arguably founded the Atlantic Studies, and Beyond a Boundary, written in 1963, which influenced the research agenda of the late 20th century cultural studies. Each book is indicative of the various wings of James's wider intellectual project, with the first asking scholars to reconsider the role of racial oppression in capitalism, and the second prompting a reconsideration of the role of class formation in popular culture via his treatment of sport, race, and imperialism. These projects combine to provide a Marxist inspired analysis of modernity in which questions of combined and uneven development are foregrounded. The result is to demonstrate the enduring links between advanced capitalist countries and colonized regions along the lines of race, class, and everyday experience. James's critique of modernity brought worldwide recognition and broke ground for others to work in this field. But equally important are his thoughts on Caribbean politics and economic, topics of his that receive relatively less attention overall. To begin, through the life of Captain Cipriani, which was written in 1932, and later the title was changed to The Case of West Indian Self Government, later in 1932. In the pre war era, he shaped the movements of West Indian independence. On returning to Trinidad in 1956 after being deported from the United States, James became the editor of The Nation, a local newspaper, famously advocating for Frank Worrell to become captain of the West Indies cricket team. This well known case is but one minor example of how James used the position to revisit fundamental questions about government and society, sensing the significance of the historical moment where West Indians could become the vanguard in the struggle for more egalitarian social relations. In the post independence period, James took stock of the various contradictions, competitions, and antagonisms that circulated in the social life of the West Indies and suggested that efforts to induce modernization were short sighted. This put him in conflict with the post independence political class, whose budding radicalism was tempered and redirected into cultural nationalism. For example, contra the news of notable Caribbean political economists like Sir Arthur Lewis, who thought that Caribbean development was hampered by unemployment and a weak local capitalist class, James stressed how prosperity could be achieved through labor taking a greater control of production. Effectively, moving Caribbean societies from an agricultural base to industrialism would likely prove difficult unless there was greater attention to the legacies of colonial governance created by racial capitalism. In summary, for James, emancipation could best be achieved through a social reconstruction of the way people relate to one another, much needed if one were to escape the problems of nationality. But sadly, James's view did not prevail. Escaping the problems of nationality led James to have a significant role in promoting Pan-Africanism, a topic he wrote about in Nkrumah and the Ghana Revolution, published in 1977. Later, when reflecting back on this period, he wrote that, quote, there were never all told more than a dozen of us who banded ourselves together in 1935 to propagate and organize for the emancipation of Africa. For years, we seemed, to the official and the learned world, to be at best political illiterates. Yet, we were part of a new world pregnant in their old decay. These words capture so well the many diverse elements of James's work, like his Marxist reading of history and his contributions of early post-colonial thought, rubbed up against the incredulity of the European intellectual class. A committed practicing post-Trotskyist, James's political James's politics catered towards revolutionary, emancipatory impulses and suggested that gradual improvements of living and working conditions were insufficient. Rather, his politics centered upon the historical and geographic interconnectedness between societies and the people who lived in them. In this respect, James anticipated the value of methodologies that examine the transnational movements of capital and knowledge, goods and people. James's contribution to cultural studies in the UK, while significant, was comparatively slow to develop. Despite being known in niche academic circles, it was only in the mid 1980s and early 1990s that his scholarly status began to increase through Stuart Hall, Bill Schwartz, and other theorists in the post colonial turn. 3 years before his death, a BBC Arena documentary, C.L.R. James' First Cricket 11, helped cement this recognition. Even so, Jonathan Scott has recently warned how this canonization courts a misinterpretation where James's project is framed as primarily concerned with self fashioning and cultural identity, an interpretation clearly at odds with James's emphasis on the totality of political life and its historical dimensions. Granted, James's wide and deep range is hard to capture in a few paragraphs, but there is an analytical urgency to his project to grasp the whole, to ultimately offer a critique of and remedy to the partiality of capitalist ideology while also resisting the established dogmas of mainstream Marxism. Each year, more of James's work is put into circulation, increasing the opportunities for sociologists to engage with all of his writing. The most promising of these comes from his time in America, the creation of and iterations from Johnson Forest's tendency, particularly how it created a scaffolding for the interpretive analysis of his later works. I suspect that James's important and contribution to the development of global society social theory will only increase in the coming decades. Perhaps aptly so, given that more than 80 years after the publication of The Black Jacobins, he remains a companion able to help students and scholars pioneer into regions Caesar never knew. Right? As I said, that was submitted by one Scott Timke. Right? Now, if you're not familiar with the Black Jacobins, I suggest that you grab a copy as soon as possible. And also the second book that was written in 1963, Beyond the Boundary. You really get to know the the thinking and the methodologies of C.L.R. James. C.L.R. James was born on January 4th, 1901, today in African history. All right. So please reach down below and hit that subscribe button, and also give us a like. And if you can, this is our fourth offering. So if you can, please give us your feedback. Let us know what you like, what you don't like, what some of the suggestions may be. It just help us make a better product. All right. Again, this is Today in African History with Baba Shaka. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Masalam.